You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
All right, Real Estate Runway family. Today we have two very special guests, friends of mine, Brian and Jana Truman. They are part of the SVN team. They own the shop here in Nashville, known as the Accel Group, highly sought after brokerage group who's been courted by many brokerages and finally made part of the SVN team. We're going to talk with them a little bit about their story because it's really super interesting. It involves Grant Cardone. It involves business brokerage. It involves being an art dealer and an appraiser. So many things that we're going to get into there. But then we're going to let them talk about what are they seeing in the real estate market? Are we likely to see a massive recession and correction of real estate values? And just what does the future hold? What lessons can we take from today and apply to our investing portfolios? So before we get into that, if you like this episode, please subscribe to us on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can just scroll right on down, do that, leave us a thoughtful comment. That's how we grow the show and reach more people just like you. So super appreciate you for doing that. If you want to reach out to be on the show, hit us at thequattroway.com/podcast. And if you'd like to reach out to us, podcast@thequattroway.com. We'd love to hear from you or just leave a comment. We read all of them and you never know. If you have a question, it might be featured on the show. So that being said, we are on all the socials. Visit us at thequattroway.com to get those or hit us at Team Quattro Capital. One word, no special characters on all the socials. Without further ado, let's get right into the episode. Here we go, my friends. All right. Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. And I have the very special pleasure to welcome two of my dear friends, Jana and Brian Truman, to the show. We have been friends a long time. We were actually just reminiscing about how they're like, hey, we knew you back when. And so maybe we get into some stories about that. But yes, Brian and Jana were some of the first people in the real estate industry that I crossed paths with when I became a, quote, serious real estate investor, and we've stayed friends for a long time. Brian and Jana, welcome to the show. How are y'all doing this afternoon? Beautiful Nashville afternoon. Welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm fantastic. I not speak for Brian, but beautiful weather.
Like you say, it's 80 degrees outside, sunny. What's not to like about this kind of a day?
That's right. The only thing I don't like is I love you guys, but I'd much rather be on the golf course right now on a day like this.
Yeah, we agree with that.
We're a sorry substitute for golf, I guess. We're not going to argue with you there.
Fair.
Yeah, so you having us on.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are here. And this has been a long time in the making. I think we scheduled this 4 months ago or something like that. So it's great to finally get on the phone with you. What I want to do first is just tell us a little bit about your brokerage and what you guys do in the space. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that's how you came into starting that and what your backgrounds are before we get into the meat of today's show, which is really what in the world is going on in the real estate market, and are we in a real estate crisis or a debt crisis? We're going to touch all those things today. But anyway, let's talk about you two first.
Sure. So every hero has an origin story, right? So that's our claim to fame is both of us were very involved in community activism, and Brian actually has, and I don't know if you even know this, Chad, but you might know this. He was an elected official. He was a city commissioner in one of the areas that we live, multiple terms commissioner. And because of that, both he and I, because I was also involved highly in the community, we had a lot of strong background in zoning and codes because of our involvement within the city, and especially with building standards, et cetera. That's something that Brian really had a strong background in. So I kind of want to set the stage for you for that. My first gig in real estate, per se, you have to know that my first career, I was a commercial artist. I was a graphic designer and I was an art director. And so I have a degree in advertising and a degree in graphic design. So for 17 years, that was my gig. And I made really good money working for myself or working for others as an art director. And I knew I wanted to create wealth, but I knew that I would not do that working in a $1 per hour job. And I knew I would not be able to, I didn't want to manage other artists, but I wanted to learn how to start my own business. And unfortunately, I didn't want to go back to school to do it. And so I put it out in the universe and basically asked God to help me put something in my path that I can learn how to start a business. And a friend of mine was getting ready to start his first company as a commercial real estate appraiser. And you know that being a financial analyst goes really well with being a professional artist. Those are usually go right hand in hand, right?
Clearly.
No. So I thought he was crazy, but he was like, no, Jana, I know you're really analytical. And I'm like, you're not wrong. And he goes, yeah, but I think you're in the wrong profession. I'm like, I'm going to words. I do think I can do this. I've been doing it for a long time. And he goes, no. Why don't you try doing the commercial real estate appraising? So got into it, got all the way, had worked for 3.5 years and said, just kill me now. When I realized I was going to be a cubicle jockey writing a 75-page math report, rinse, repeat for the rest of my life, I went, no. Timeout number 1, not going to do that. Brian had been in corporate America and he had a side hustle doing business brokerage. And when I realized that I loved everything about commercial real estate, except for writing that really boring report, I switched and had my main hustle become business brokerage and commercial real estate. So then we transferred ownership of that and signed a non-compete and a confidentiality agreement. And I became a commercial realtor just 100%. That was my main gig. So then after time, then I got so busy and Brian was in corporate America that he was hostile takeover after hostile takeover, but he was at the top of his game. He was the guy that spoke at the conferences. He was proven talent. And I thought, if I can get over my sorry self of not having the confidence in myself and him, wanting to have the security of a corporate job, and if I can allow us to have both of us be 100% commission, who knows what's going to happen? And so that was what I did is I was like, all right, I think I can do this. And so we teach people to invest in properties. That's what you do. My first big investment was in us, just investing in us both getting educated and switching him into a different field. But his origin story only just starts there. I'm going to let him tell you about how he got focusing specifically just on commercial, on multifamily, because I think that's a really entertaining story.
Yeah,
I'll say so myself.
Yeah, I'll try to make it very brief. But it was back in 2016. Jana said, people ask me all the time, how do you get focusing just on multifamily and nothing else? That is 2016. It was a Saturday before Christmas, 6:30 at night. We were leaving the house to go to dinner, and my phone rings, and it says unknown number, but the area code was like 310. And I knew from all my days of traveling that was LA, because I'd traveled for 23 years. And I looked at that, but normally I didn't answer any unknown numbers. I answered it for whatever reason. The guy said, I got your name from a residential realtor. He said, I'm in a real bind, and that is that I've sold my property here in Los Angeles. I want to buy multifamily in Nashville, but I only have until midnight tonight to identify my 3 properties for my 1031 exchange. And remember, this is 6:30 at night on a Saturday.
The day before Christmas.
Yeah. And so I basically said to him, I was like, yeah, you're in a real pickle there. So I said, but give me 30 minutes. And so I remembered, because I had only had my license like 3 weeks. So I remembered one of the guys I went through real estate school said that his stepfather had 5 multifamily properties. I remember that conversation. So when I told this gentleman, give me 30 minutes, I called that guy that I went through real estate school with and said, hey, I remember you saying your stepfather had 5 multifamily properties. Would he entertain an offer on one or any of them, 3, 4, whatever? And he said, you know what? Give me 30 minutes. I'll call you back. So by the time we got to dinner and sat down and ordered, phone rang, he called back and he said, yeah, my stepfather has 3 properties that he would entertain the offer. I said, okay, can you text those to me So he texted them to me. I texted them to the gentleman that called, said, here's the 3. You can give these to your 1031 intermediary. And from there. So fast forward, we put those under contract. They flew out here right after New Year's. He came off the airplane with his video photographer and all kinds of stuff. And
His entourage.
We
didn't know who we were dealing with.
We're like, who in the world is this guy? And he happened to be real good friends with Grant Cardone at the time. And so anyway, we went through the process, got him taken care of, all of that. He also puts on a national conference every year. And it was coming up in a few months. So he invited us down to the conference. Since we'd helped him, they put us right on the front row. So we sat right next to Grant Cardone and Elena and all those good folks that he had coming to speak. And so right before lunch, he stood up to give his kind of rags to riches story. And that ended right before lunch. But he had said, yeah, I bought some multifamily property in Nashville and my Tennessee realtor is here. Hey, Brian Truman, would you stand up? So I stood up. Everybody in the crowd obviously then sees you. I sit back down. 5 minutes later, they break for lunch and we're supposed to go have a private lunch with Grant and his wife and this gentleman and his wife. As soon as they broke for lunch, I got mobbed. So Chad, that was the closest I ever came to understanding what it feels like to be a movie star or something or whatever. And so I told Jana, I was like, you go to lunch, I'll stand here and answer questions. So I stood there for an hour and a half and did nothing but answer questions. Right. And so that's how I got started. And because of that, I came back with oodles and oodles of buyers. And so from then on, that's basically how I got into multifamily, helping people buy and sell. And obviously I've done this for 7 years now, but that's how it all started. And so it was one of those things where after a couple of months being in the business, I wasn't hurting for looking for buyers. I had plenty of them now.
So the fun part is that now we have a brokerage that he has his specialty, but we cover all of the segments. So when you hear the term full service brokerage, that actually refers to us in that everybody that works for us has a primary and a secondary specialty. So in office, industrial, retail, multifamily, land, hospitality, investment. So all of those, there's somebody who is a specialist for our company that works with us.
So you hear a lot of talking about teams, right? I feel like we're not only full service, but we are the true team concept for our whole company, meaning somebody goes on vacation, somebody steps in, covers them while they're gone, goes and does their showings, meets with any inspectors, anything else. And it's not required that person pay somebody to cover them while they're gone. We're a true team. We have our team meetings every Monday. We do training, at least 30 minutes to 45 minutes of training every week for our agents. And I tell our agents all the time, you guys know a lot more about real estate than you realize that you give yourself credit for.
So a year ago, actually, it's a year ago in just a couple of weeks, we affiliated with the national brand, which is SVN. It was originally Sperry Van Ness, but now it's just SVN. And that means that there's over 190 offices nationwide with over 1,900 agents nationwide. So we can do deals across state lines and do those regularly. We also, SVN has a couple of unique claims to fame in that they're one of the only commercial brokerages that when we list properties, we actually share commission on the buy side. And for your listeners, if somebody's coming from the residential world, that may feel weird because you're used to in the residential world that both sides share commission, but in the commercial world, that's actually not the case. So essentially, when you hire us, you're hiring everybody else as well, because we're actually helping them. We're marketing to everyone. And in fact, SBN has more marketing channels and a wider marketing distribution than any other commercial brokerage in the United States. So remember what I talked about was my original background, then that's important. So now you have me where if you're going to hire someone to represent your property, you have somebody who's an actual professional marketer with a background in valuation, with both of us understanding real estate in the context of business who are expert negotiators and who are specialists in their given fields. So I think it turns out that you think maybe like God had something to do with that word.
So we feel like we're unique, like you were saying earlier, Chad, in that we feel like our brokerage is a little different than any other brokerage here in Nashville at all.
So we claim that we're weird, and we're okay with that.
As long as you own it.
We own it. We own our weirdness.
I love that. And every time I hear that story about the whole going from business brokerage, and Jana, I hadn't heard your half of it. So it was great to hear your early days as from the art side and then as the appraiser. But that is a potent mix, y'all. Understanding zoning, understanding appraisals, having the analytics for that. And what they didn't tell you, because they're super humble, is although they chose SVN, there were several other big brokerages who were chasing them as well. And I was so happy to see that they did choose SVN. So you have a very potent mixture with these folks. So real quickly, before we get into the meat, Brian and Jana, I know because you're part of SVN now, there's really no limit to what you can service, but what areas does your office service so that my listeners who are on the phone who may be thinking about buying or selling a property, that they'll know the relevancy to reach out for your markets?
Yeah. If I can back up one last second, Chad, is that you're correct in the two of us. I tell everybody that Jana's our secret sauce, right? And it's because of her evaluation background. So I think when we're up against our competitors for a listing, there's a couple of things that stand out. Number one is her evaluation background, because when we go in and talk to somebody about listing their property, we're like, hey, we're going to tell you what your property is going to appraise for or real close to it. And we're not here as a brokerage to give you a pie in the sky number just to get your listing, because we don't list properties, we sell them. It's a big difference between those two. And we're like, hey, 95% of people are going to have to get a loan, which means they're going to have to get an appraisal. So we're going to let you know what that property is going to appraise for. And I think we've only, in all the time when we went head to head with somebody, I think we've lost one listing. That's it. And then fast forward to adding SVN and the fact that we share commission. And SVN has proven that by sharing commission, because you have the wider distribution channels, that we can get 9.6% higher price for somebody that's selling their property because of that fact. So anyway, just to add those two in there. And now what was Chad's question?
That's pretty huge. And just while we're talking about the brokerage, and I know SVN covers a tremendous amount of markets with that name, but what are your core markets that your office covers so that if anyone listening is ready to buy or sell a property, they know whether to properly reach out?
So for multifamily, it's Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, and all of Tennessee. For the
and multifamily is our largest segment
for us.
But
as far as other segments, we stick mainly in the Middle Tennessee area, although we have sold things other parts of Tennessee, but primarily we are mainly in Tennessee. One thing that you may want to note is that we are going to be doing a commercial property management company, and that will be not only in the state of Tennessee, but it's potentially going to be all throughout the United States, depending on where our clients have their portfolios.
And that's a commercial
property management. Not residential. We don't do scattered site residential, just commercial. And so that by the time this airs, that will already be a reality.
Fantastic. So it's imminent at this point.
It's imminent. Yeah. It's coming.
And I think we do quite a bit of landlord and tenant representation too. You're talking about some of the stronger maybe segments that we're known for. That's one of them, is helping landlords and tenants find, especially on the landlord side, helping them find those credit rated tenants that are going to increase their NOI value on the property and all that stuff.
They go really well together, because you have people who are investors, we call investment services, and then there is what is called occupation services. So people who buy the buildings, they need to have tenants, right? But they're not occupying those buildings. So they're buying cash flow. So you're using money to make money. And over here on the occupation services, They are renting the buildings that the investors are, but they're primarily looking for something that they want to occupy, whether they're owning it or whether they're leasing it. So they go hand in hand because the investors want the tenants. They want the money to be able to do that. On the commercials, it's a good play back and forth.
And folks, this is the Real Estate Runway Show. I know we talk a lot about residential and self-storage and we talk a lot about unit-based real estate and sometimes land. What Jana's referring to is really more on the triple net lease or the commercial side. You don't just hire a property manager to go turn over your tenants because these are like 3, 5, 10-year leases, right? It's a big effort to match the right tenant to the right commercial space. And that's what she's talking about. That's occupation services. Whereas, of course, what we do on the buy side of acquisitions, that's an investment service. So I'm sure we'll get into that. And I'd love to pivot with that context, Brian and Jana. It's April 2023 when we're recording this. We've just endured a strenuous 3 years of a COVID pandemic, a supply chain and inflation explosion, an interest rate, and I'm going through 2020, 2021, and then now an interest rate, biggest hike since the 1970s. So there's some interesting things going on in the world today. And I think your group, you have a unique perspective of seeing not just multifamily, not just single family, not just commercial. You see it all. So I'd love to just open the floor and say, what are you seeing out there today? Is the world ending as we know it? What's going on in your eyes?
This episode is brought to you by Agora's investment management solution. Are you a GP or syndicator still using spreadsheets or an outdated investment management platform? Advance to Agora, the next step in investment management evolution. Agora's customers raise capital 40% faster and reduce operational expenses by 25%. With Agora, you can collect commitments faster, raise more capital by creating beautifully designed data rooms, public brochures, and automated subscription flows. Manage all your investor relationships efficiently with the most advanced investor CRM on the market. Delight your investors with a beautifully designed investor portal, which is fully customized to fit your brand and integrates seamlessly into your website. Distribute payments in a click directly from the platform and automatically generate and send all the reports and statements your investors need. Agora is suited for all types and all sizes of GPs or syndicators, starting with an affordable $5.99 a month subscription plan. Click the link in the description to book a live demo and learn what Agora can do for your business. Agora, better investment management.
Yeah, that's a great question. But I would say, too bad we're not interviewing you, Chad Sutton, because I've interviewed Chad a few times for some of one of the groups that I facilitate for. And I think Chad has great knowledge as far as the whole banking and money and all those good things. But yeah, I think what we're seeing, and Jana can speak to probably this even more than I can, we're seeing a lot of banks pull back on their lending. And it really, what I'm seeing anyway, it doesn't matter what segment necessarily that is. I have a local lender here in town that, like last year, they're probably the lender on at least 13 deals, multifamily deals I did last year. And this year, they won't touch multifamily. And they won't touch other segments. All they want is investor that's going to occupy that building. Then they're all about that. But other than that, there's just a lot of lenders that are really...
The spigot has turned off.
Yeah, as far as lending wise. Now, it hasn't turned off as far as people wanting to still purchase commercial real estate. That hasn't. In fact, January, it seemed like the spigot turned back on as far as people wanting to purchase. It's just a lot tougher to find the lending right now in this market.
So what ended up happening is we had a little bit of a gap for where I would call it a skid or whatever. When banking shut down, that was the signal to the cash investors. When Warren Buffett says everybody else is getting out, that's when you get in. So you look at where is the opportunity in that. We're seeing in commercial real estate that we're still now dealing with a lot of buyers, but they have alternative lending sources or they are using cash or are being very creative. A lot of them are doing loan assumptions. So the properties that are able to turn, they're actually going in and buying properties where they can assume the loan. And even if there's a prepayment penalty, they are willing to pay that so that they can basically enjoy the benefits of the lower interest rate. So that's fun.
Yeah, adding on to that, I think it's interesting because somebody like Chad Sutton that's been investing for a while, you guys really haven't went anywhere. It's just the deal has to make sense for you to do it, right? That type of deal. But you had maybe the first time investor that had just bought their first property. They now see the interest rates and this has scared them. So they moved off to the sideline. Those folks that were on the sideline during the pandemic and they just hoarded cash for the last couple of years. It's interesting because now they're seeing people move to the sideline. So they're like, hey, we're going to get in, even though the interest rates are where they are, but it's because they have a lot of cash. So.
But something that I think is really interesting, I thought, going back, I thought that I was going to see more default because of CMBC loans, et cetera. And actually what I'm finding, as I'm talking to people to the lenders who are seeing some, like with defeasance or something like that, where they're seeing some problems come up, but the banks are in a different position they learned from 2007 and 2008. So they're going a lot slower with those folks as far as trying to foreclose. So what that means is a lot of those buyers were thinking, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to scoop in and we're going to take that, where the banks are slow stepping that. Now that might happen more third or fourth quarter of 2023 if they don't get the cash strapped seller or the cash strapped owner of those buildings where they bought and they had razor thin margins and with a variable rate, and now they're in a world of hurt. So we're watching very carefully to see what's going to happen with those folks and to see if there's going to be any opportunity for our buyers to be able to come in and scoop and get those properties. But it's not as much as you would think. And part of that, in particular with Middle Tennessee, is the vacancy rates on the segments that, besides commercial, the multifamily, retail and industrial mainly are the two that have had almost no hiccup. And in fact, vacancy rates for retail. So if you've got your owner goggles on and you're owning a retail property here in Middle Tennessee, or actually pretty much in any part of the state, they're sitting pretty because rents are still climbing because vacancy rates are so low. And they have a pipeline deficit and a growing demand. So unless they have a trigger event, it doesn't make sense for them to sell, right? Because they can pick and choose who they want to have come in. And we obviously can help them be very granular in their demographics and their tenant mix. But on the industrial, we have a huge pent-up demand for light industrial in the greater Nashville area.
Your industrial vacancy is like 2.8%, and that's the lowest across the entire country.
Yeah.
They're coming, and retail is not far behind that. It's crazy. But to Jana's point, I think there are going to be some owners that have not been able to execute on their business plan from when they bought the property here in the next, I'd say 5-6 months, going to about 2 years. I think some of them that cannot execute. I think you're going to see them obviously selling.
Those trigger events.
I think right now it's for a lot of sellers, unless they have to absolutely sell because of rates, they're just choosing not to.
It's very interesting you say that. And I think I remember you and I went to lunch not long ago, Brian, at a great little 360 bistro here near the house. And as we were eating fish and chips and being unhealthy together, I think we were...
I was being unhealthy. You were eating healthy. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I was eating a shrimp cocktail that day anyway. So usually I would have been on the fish and chips train too. Yeah. But anyway, I digress. We were talking about, you mentioned there's just a different set of buyers out today. And I think you just articulated it. The ones who are buying heavily on leverage are forced to pull back or put more equity down. And those who are equity heavy or cash are at the table, and I've been one of them. I've been groveling and doing that mwahaha thing with my hands, trying to find the pain. And I love hearing you articulate it, Jana, it's just not happening. And so that's interesting to hear the bank's perspective is the banks are not being as quick. Maybe they're working with the borrowers a little bit more. They're trying to restructure.
They are.
Things of that sort.
Because they don't want the properties back. They don't want to have to be in the landlord business. And the biggest thing is there's so much scrutiny right now on portfolio management on the banking side. So if you're talking about the equity, the debt side, right? That they're taking very careful looks at their portfolios. They're trying to make sure that they are even across the board so that they're not having exposure for any given thing. And the last thing they want is to have some deals be a reason for them to get a lower rating. And they don't want that. And so they're working really hard to work with those sellers. And I think there's going to be some ripple. And so when we start seeing that pain, Chad, we'll let you know. You may be crazy for other reasons, but you're not crazy and seeing that the deals are much harder to find.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, though, is not only have the interest rates gone up, but most of the banks have increased their debt service coverage ratio. So it's not just the money that they're willing to lend, it's that they are making it so that the income padding is actually 10 basis points higher than it was even just
when your
4 months ago.
It used to be 1.25 or something like that.
And now it's 1.35.
1.35. Some of them are even at 1.45, right?
Depending on the property types. And so if you can afford to pay half of the property, why would you need the bank in the first place? It's kind of the whole thing, right?
And I've seen that before. It's a telegraph of, hey, we're open for lending, but you got to do 40% LTV or something like that. So it's like they're open, but they're not open. It's almost pricing themselves out. But the interesting thing and I love where y'all were going with this. I just made a connection talking to you here, Jana. It's almost a good thing. So folks, if you are owning a piece of property and maybe you're a little behind on the business plan or you're worried about your loan refinance prospects or whatever, or if you're an investor in something that's going that way, I've had in my head that there's going to be serious pain in this time. And there may be. As Jana mentioned, this is a law of averages. There will be some people that Warren Buffett says, when the water recedes, the naked man is exposed. So the ones who are doing the worst are probably going to feel a foreclosure and get screwed. But if you're generally increasing your net operating income, generally following your business plan, and the market's just a little odd for you right now, you probably have more negotiating power with the bank than you think you do if you're worried about that. And here's why. We just ramped rates at the fastest rate. Also, while for the first time in history, to my knowledge, the first time we've ever jacked interest rates and removed money from the market at the same time. We started to see cracks in the ice of the banking system. And what did we do? We stopped, right? And they reversed some of that and put money back into the system to back up the bank failures. Since the bank failures just happened, you go back to the great financial crisis when 2006, 2007, 2008 were happening before it got real bad, when Lehman Brothers failed and all that kind of stuff. I think it was actually 2008 when they failed. Mm-hmm. But the foreclosures had already started to happen. The mass defaults had already started to happen. We hadn't had a bank failure. We weren't worried about bank balance sheets. No bank right now wants to have an asset or a balance sheet full of failed loans. That you just made the golden connection, Jana. And unfortunately, now I think I see that we're not going to really see a massive depression in real estate that I get to
Sorry to have to tell you that.
But no,
you're licking your chops, but
I was licking my chops. But I think what you're saying is we are going to see some decompression in prices. It's happening. If you have to sell now, it's already happening. But you just solidified. We're not in a crisis. I don't think it's going to become a crisis because we've already had the bank failure and they're not going to want to see a mass foreclosure situation.
I also want to make sure that, and probably most of your viewers know this, but just in case they don't, that the banks that failed, they are in high risk debt in a specific segment, in a specific area of the country. And so it is not, while there is a consumer confidence aspect that goes along with that, but local banks right now, in some cases in the Middle Tennessee, are actually pretty cash flush because they have, like you said, come down a little bit on the amount of lending. So they actually have more money now than they've had in years to deploy if you qualify for those. Much harder to make area.
Yeah, the other lenders that seem to be a whole lot more cash flush right now too are the credit unions. Credit unions seem to be, no matter which one I talk to, they're the ones calling us going, hey, do you have anybody to send us? Do you have anybody to send us? Because they seem to be sitting on a lot of money that they need to get to lend out. And in fact, some of them are even offering interest only, right? Which is a rarity for them. So there is still lending to be had out there. There's still bills to be had out there too. You just got to find them. But also lending-wise, there's still lenders out there that are happy to lend you money to, that seem to have some, they're sitting on a lot of cash.
So when deals are harder to find, then you have to default to market fundamentals and to a really good game. In other words, something that I admire about your organization is that you don't take breaks. You're constantly analyzing deals. You're looking not only in Tennessee, but all over the United States, trying to find really good properties that are going to meet your investment criteria, right? So I think to try to help what we're saying be evergreen and not just specific to this exact second in this moment of time, which in a month could be different. I think if we step back and say, the market fundamentals are strong. We're not seeing we're going to go anywhere. And the irony is, even with what's going on in China, from an investor standpoint, I read in an article this morning that said it's not a good idea to pick a fight with your creditors. Right? So I think with the United States being debt to China, I don't think that, well, if we do have some sort of a conflict with them, I'd be very curious. That would be devastating to the world economy. But I think China's banking on us being very slow to come to the rescue because they can call our loans. So if they do, that's $3 trillion kind of a thing. If you are an investor trying to decide what it is you're going to do, I think it's business as usual. Just keep plugging along. Dirt and sticks and bricks is ultimately the safest investment because it still is going to retain its value. It's a thing. Stocks and bonds, as much as I like them, they can go to zero and you're left with nothing. There is a flight to safety, and we're seeing a lot of those people that were investing in stocks and bonds moving into real estate and making sure that they have a diversified portfolio for that exact reason. It's a flight to safety.
I couldn't have said that better myself. So folks, we're going to let that be the mic drop moment of the episode. That is, if you have a mic, just go ahead and pick it up and drop it on the desk for me, Jana. And,
Boom.
Boom. That is amazing said. And folks, fundamentals, don't stop playing. And I think Dr. Peter Linneman says it best, one of our favorite economists. If you have courage and capital in the times when others don't, that's where you make your wealth. That's where you make the most money. The most millionaires and billionaires were made during the great financial crisis.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Downturns are, you just have to be prepared and ready. And if you're not, don't play in it because you don't want to get exposed. But get hooked up with somebody like Chad who knows the market, who is already in it, who's doing those fundamentals on a consistent basis over time. So the other caveat is listen to brokers who know what they're doing. Make sure that you are dealing with, whether it's us or someone else, that somebody who is truly going to look out for you and for your portfolio management and your plan as a long-term goal, who understands banking, who understands the market, and who understands your goals all in combination to make sure that we are going to help you get to where it is that you want to go in spite of the ebbs and flows and the currents, and help you look out for all the reefs and the rocks.
Want to generate higher return and drive alpha for your commercial real estate firm? Now you can with Lobby CRE by 30 Capital. Lobby CRE is an asset management platform designed to manage and optimize cash flow for faster returns and more visibility into performance. Shift your strategy with the market, not because of it. Identify opportunities and mitigate risk now rather than later, and save more than 8 hours per week through automation. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and book a demo.
I love that. And You two, before we end the episode, we could do this all day. Like, this is just a fantastic conversation. So thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. But how can the listeners get in touch with you should they want to reach out for occupancy services or, brokerage or whatever else along the way?
Our website is accelcre.com. And I'm Jana Truman, and my email is literally jana.truman@svn.com, and Brian is brian.truman@svn.com. We are here to help you. If you're looking to relocate your business or find space or expand your business in the Middle Tennessee area, we are happy and have a full team to be able to help you do that. And if you're looking for investments, we have a full team of brokers who are waiting and willing and ready and knowledgeable enough to help you go through the gauntlet that is the current market.
And on that website, Jana, just listed, we do 2 learning series. We love to provide education. So if you're looking to just want to get education about real estate, and that we have 2 free, that's the best thing about it. It is free education twice a month as well.
All right, everyone. That has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Thanks to Brian and Jana for spending so much time talking with us about what they're seeing in the market. And folks, if you take nothing else away from this show, if you have courage and capital when others don't, if you have the ability to invest with cash while lenders are backing up, and if you have the ability to see that, wow, the real estate market is not crumbling, it's going to be okay, you're going to make a lot of money right now, okay? So if you liked what you heard, please leave us that 5-star review and thoughtful comment, or subscribe to us on YouTube at Real Estate Runway. Those ratings are worth their weight in gold and the only way to spread the show to more people just like you. So thank you for that in advance. If you want to hit us on social media, Team Quattro Capital, one word, no special characters. And if you want to email us and tell us what you want to hear about on the show, or just say hi, podcast@thequattroway.com. And finally, if you want to apply to be on the show, we'd love to have you. I love these conversations. thequattroway.com/podcast. Until next time, this has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway podcast.